John Pienaar with Times Radio Drive. It's good to have your company. A massive evidence has landed showing routine screening of all men over 50 for prostate cancer would save lives in Britain. Thousands of lives. That's seriously good news if it leads to a change in NHS policy and a national screening programme. And I'm not just saying that because one of the lives that may well have been saved by screening happens to be mine. Though, come to think of it, the fact that I am sitting here and not worried about the cancer doctors found in my prostate earlier last year, which they told me was gone, not just in remission, but cured earlier this year, that it's rather persuaded me that early screening for older men like me is a very, very good idea. Now, in a moment, more about the massive study involving 162,000 men aged 50 and over in Europe, which found regular PSA blood tests, now that stands for prostate-specific antigen, that it reduced deaths by 13% over 2 decades. Now, that's similar to the life-saving benefits of breast and bowel cancer. Now, I haven't, incidentally, discussed my own case on air before now, or for that matter with many people anywhere. But today seems a good time to share a bit about my own experience of early diagnosis of prostate cancer and early treatment, which turned out to be, well, rather less of an ordeal than I, and I'm guessing a lot of men on radiotherapy, drugs, or after surgery vaguely imagined beforehand. Now, the Times columnist Charles Corrin, who happens to be one of my favourite writers on the paper, and who also was diagnosed but judged not to need treatment because they found it early enough, he's joining me live on today's show. I wonder what you are thinking. Send me a text, 87222, start with the word Times, or a tweet to @TimesRadio. Now, a little later, how big a deal is Rachel Reeves failing to get the necessary licence sorted out before renting out her house in South London? And what can we read into the talks between President Trump and Xi before travelling home? The US president branded negotiations with his Chinese counterpart as amazing. But while the trade war might have thawed, for now, are we heading towards further tension in the future and maybe a new nuclear race? And we'll have the latest for you on the election in the Netherlands, which looks like a cliffhanger, still likely to deprive the right-wing anti-Islam populists Geert Wilders of a share of power. That is coming up. First, though, our top story, our top discussion today. Could thousands of lives be saved if prostate cancer screening is introduced for men over 50? I mentioned that groundbreaking trial found that regular prostate-specific antigen blood tests reduced tests. It was shown in this study by 13% over two decades. Now, I want to welcome to the programme Giles Corrin, Times columnist, who was diagnosed with prostate cancer at the beginning of the year. Giles, welcome to you.
Hello, John, and you know what an honour to be the first person on air after your reveal. And I kind of want to say welcome to the club. Congratulations, congratulations on having it, and then congratulations on it. Sounds like dealing with it so swiftly and efficiently.
Well, it's kind of you to say that, Giles, and of course, what you're saying is part of the point, isn't it? Because certainly more people need to be tested, and then some of those diagnosed, and then treatment given to those people early, because that's going to save a lot of people from, a hard time, and a number of them from an early death. It's the most common cancer in Britain. It's got 55,300 cases and 12,200 deaths. But Giles, as you know, studying the statistics, it doesn't and it can't compare to that moment when the doctor points to the scans and the biopsy results and says, well, I'm afraid it's cancer, especially if you weren't expecting to hear that, and you know that very well.
Yes, well, that sort of instant, the shock, which in my case, and I think in most cases, people are pretty well prepared for. So it's generally explained in the run-up after your PSA is raised. You go for the MRI scan now rather than the digital, the finger up the bum thing. They don't tend to do so much, and then that sort of path towards biopsy. You're told it probably won't kill you now that we're here. That it is a slow cancer. That there's time. But that particular shock that people get, and some people freak out. I don't know how you did. I was okay. It's one of the reasons that people have resisted the screening. And that's what I love about this story on the front page of the Times today, because whenever I've spoken out, only because I feel, well, look, that's the thing you do if you're a commentator. You get an illness and then you think, well, I better help other people with it. And when I've called for screening, just because that's what I was given to understand was the thing to do, there was a lot of kickback. There has been pushback from an anti-screening community. And it sounds to me like, this is good evidence for us that when this decision is made, I think next month, that it'll be brought in.
Yeah, I mean, that one of the first things I said in that consulting room when the medic gave me the news was, well, if this is going to kill me, and he quickly interrupted me and said, this isn't going to kill you. And it sounded as if to him that was obvious, which to him it absolutely was. And after that moment, Giles, somehow everything that came afterwards just somehow felt easier.
Yes, it did. It did, it's sort of, there could be, you can be treated. The prostatectomy is a routine thing, and now, as you obviously know, and I don't know what kind of treatment you had, and I won't ask, but there's many different ways of treating. There's new kinds of therapies. There's new kind of local excisions. There's treatment with water and lasers, and there's all sorts of different things. There are, you'll survive, but there are downsides, potential downsides, around erectile function and incontinence that they happen less and less now as the treatments get better and better. So, there's a worry for some about unnecessary intervention, but I feel strongly, and it sounds like you do, that information is king. The thing is to know. Let's find out the state of our prostates if we're men over 50, or if we're black, then possibly over 45, because it will affect you younger and more likely. Let's find out. Be armed with the information. We're grown-ups. If they tell us we've got cancer, let's not lose our minds. I had this experience. I wrote a measured piece in the Times to tell my readers, to make some jokes, to as a columnist, that was the big thing that happened that week. It was hard to write about anything else. It was in the Times, it was fine. All the other papers that followed up went, former BBC star in cancer tragedy shock. And first of all, I went, what do you mean former? And then secondly, this hysteria. And people who hadn't read my Times piece but had seen the Express or the Guardian or the Mail where it was followed up were all sending their commiserations, sending flowers. And I'm going, no, it's okay. I'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, Giles, I didn't actually have my prostate removed. I had daily radiotherapy for a few weeks and hormone pills for a few months. And I'd have happily lived without either one of those, but none of it was really a big deal, I felt, in my case. I did at one point, by the way, ask my producer, Sandra, to forgive me in advance, because she was one of the people I told if I seemed grumpier than usual around the office. Maybe she thought I was just being grumpy anyway. It's just what I'm like. And as for being diagnosed, it is getting quicker, and it'll get quicker still. There's AI techniques being developed as well, although those biopsies, as you write about in your piece, they're not exactly dignified, lying there with your legs in the air. And I've got to say, at one point the nurse said to me, well, of course, I'm sorry, this isn't very dignified. And it was just so screamingly obvious that it wasn't dignified. We all burst into laughter. Anyway, look, we hope, don't we, you and I and many others, that this study leads to automatic screening for all men over 50, because I know that I'm an interested party, but it looks to me like almost an unarguably good thing.
I think so. I agree. And the small risks that accrue to sort of a misdiagnosis seem to be small compared to the number of lives. It's a strong case made that a lot of lives can be saved. And I would just always think, if the medical community can provide the information, if we've arrived at a time in history when this sort of information is available and treatment is as straightforward as it is, then it's close to criminal to ignore it.
Great to talk to you, Giles. Thank you. Giles Corrin there. Now let's get the thoughts of Eleanor Hayward, the health editor at the Times. Hi to you, Eleanor.
Hi.
Give us your thoughts. Welcome, Eleanor. Give us your thoughts on this new research, which looks pretty powerful, doesn't it? What are the chances it will lead to routine testing for men over 50?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly helps to tip the balance sort of more in favour of screening. As you said, there's this really important meeting coming up next month of the National Screening Committee, which is a team that advises the NHS and the government on screening programmes. And at the moment, prostate cancer doesn't have any form of national screening. I mean, breast cancer and bowel cancer do. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting about this new study is that it shows that prostate screening has a similar benefit in terms of cutting deaths as the existing breast and bowel screening programmes. Yes. So it becomes sort of harder to make a case against it when you've got this really strong evidence that it does save lives. Right. And at the moment, I think people are not expecting mass screening to be recommended. I think it's more likely that we get some sort of targeted programme for high-risk men, which would be a change on the current situation. But obviously some people are calling for it to be much wider.
Yes. And Eleanor, what about the incidence of prostate cancer? Are cases increasing in number, and is that happening significantly?
Yeah, it is. I think prostate cancer is now the most common cancer in England. It affects 55,000 men each year in the UK, and there's about 12,000 deaths a year. And incidence is expected to keep increasing because it increases with age. And obviously, with more men getting tested, then more people are getting diagnosed. And I think, we've all reported on this quite big campaign backed by a lot of politicians, a lot of celebrities as well, for prostate screening. And it's clear, just from the discussion you just had with Giles, how that there is this big demand from men just saying, well, give us the information and sort of let us decide for ourselves.
All right. Eleanor Hayward, health editor at The Times. Thank you so much, Eleanor.